hearing from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. There's no bad time to read the Bhagavatam. It's nityam bhagavata sevaya, an eternal process of hearing and chanting about Krishna. And tonight, well, it's just heartfelt that you all came here tonight, really is. I mean, who comes just to hear Bhagavatam? You do, and that's a testament to your advancement in devotional service. So we'll start with a little chanting, and then we'll go right into the reading. And as we read Bhagavatam, then there's a way that I'll go for some time, and then we can take some reflections or questions. So note as I'm reading to you from the verses and Prabhupada's purports, we'll read from 6th Canto, if that news didn't get out. And then you can reflect back any of the main points you heard, or if there's a point for discussion you think it'll add to the hearing process, you can ask a question that might deepen. And we won't dwell too long on that. We'll try to mostly do hearing, but we'll stop at intervals just to process a little bit. Does that sound okay? Okay. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur-milidam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chapter, the history of the life of Ajamila. Chapter summary. Throughout Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, there are descriptions of 10 subject matters, including creation, subsequent creation, and the planetary systems. Shukadeva Goswami, the speaker of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, has already described creation, subsequent creation, and the planetary systems in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th cantos. Now in this 6th canto, which consists of 19 chapters, he will describe Poshana, or protection by the Lord. The first chapter relates the history of Ajamila, who was considered a greatly sinful man, but was liberated when 4 order carriers of Vishnu came to rescue him from the hands of the order carriers of Yamaraj. A full description of how he was liberated, having been relieved of the reactions of his sinful life, is given in this chapter. Sinful reactions are painful, both in this life and in the next. We should know for certain that the cause of all painful life is sinful action. On the path of fruit of work, one certainly commits sinful activities, and therefore, according to the considerations of karma kanda, different types of atonement are recommended. Such methods of atonement, however, do not free one from ignorance, which is the root of sinful life. Consequently, one is prone to commit sinful activities even after atonement, which is therefore very inadequate for purification. On the path of speculative knowledge, one becomes free from sinful life by understanding things as they are. Therefore, the acquirement of speculative knowledge is also considered a method of atonement. While performing fruitive activities, one can become free from the actions of sinful life through austerity, penance, celibacy, control of the mind and senses, truthfulness, and the practice of mystic yoga. By awakening knowledge, one may also neutralize sinful reactions. Neither of these methods, however, can free one from the tendency to commit sinful activities. By bhakti yoga, one can completely avoid the tendency for sinful life. Other methods are not very feasible. Therefore, the Vedic literature concludes that devotional service is more important than the methods of karmakanda and jnanakanda. Only the path of devotional service is auspicious for everyone. Fruit of activities and speculative knowledge cannot independently liberate anyone, but devotional service, independent of karma and jnana, is so potent that one who has fixed his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna is guaranteed not to meet the Yamadutas, the order carriers of Yamaraj, even in dreams. To prove the strength of devotional service, Shukadeva Goswami described the history of Ajamila. Ajamila was a resident of Kanyakubja, the modern Kunauj. He was trained by his parents to become a perfect Brahmana by studying the Vedas and following the regulative principles. But because of his past, this youthful Brahmana was somehow attracted by a prostitute. And because of her association, he became most fallen and abandoned all regulative principles. Ajamila begot in the womb of the prostitute 10 sons, the last of whom was called Nārāyaṇa. At the time of Ajamila's death, when the order carriers of Yamaraj came to take him, he loudly called the name Nārāyaṇa in fear because he was attached to his youngest son. Thus he remembered the original Nārāyaṇa, Lord Vishnu. Although he did not chant the holy name of Nārāyaṇa completely offenselessly, it acted nevertheless. As soon as he chanted the holy name of Nārāyaṇa, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu immediately appeared on the scene. A discussion ensued between the order carriers of Lord Vishnu and those of Yamaraj. And by hearing that discussion, Ajamila was liberated. He could then understand the bad effect of fruitive activities and could also understand how exalted is the process of devotional service. Text 1. Maharaj Parikshit said, O my Lord, O Shukadeva Goswami, you have already described in the second canto the path of liberation, nivṛtti marg. By following that path, one is certainly elevated gradually to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, from which one is promoted to the spiritual world along with Lord Brahma. Thus one's repetition of birth and death in the material world ceases. Purport. Since Maharaj Parikshit was a Vaishnava, when he heard the description at the end of the 5th canto of the different hellish conditions of life, he was very much concerned with how to liberate conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya and take them back home, back to Godhead. Therefore he reminded his spiritual master Shukadeva Goswami about the nivṛtti marg, or path of liberation, which he had described in the 2nd canto. Maharaj Parikshit, who at the time of death was fortunate to have met Shukadeva Goswami, he inquired from Shukadeva Goswami about the path of liberation at that crucial time. Shukadeva Goswami very much appreciated his question and congratulated him, saying, Variyan eshite prashna, krita loka tandrapa, atmavit samata pungsam, shrotavyadishu ya paraha. My dear king, your question is glorious because it is very beneficial for all kinds of people. The answer to this question is the prime subject matter for hearing, and it is approved by all transcendentalists. From Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 2.1.1. Parikshit Maharaj was astonished that the living entities in the conditional stage do not accept the path of liberation, devotional service, instead of suffering in so many hellish conditions. This is the symptom of a Vaishnava. Vancha kalpatarubhascha kripasindubhya evacha. A Vaishnava is an ocean of mercy. Paradhuka dukhi. He is unhappy because of the unhappiness of others. Therefore, Parikshit Maharaj, being compassionate toward the conditioned souls suffering in hellish life, suggested that Shukadeva Goswami continue describing the path of liberation, which he had explained in the beginning of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. The word asamsriti is very important in this connection. Samsriti refers to continuing on the path of birth and death. Asamsriti, on the contrary, refers to nivṛtti marg, or the path of liberation, by which one's birth and death cease, and one gradually progresses to Brahmaloka, unless one is a pure devotee who does not care about going to the higher planetary systems, in which case one immediately returns home back to Godhead by executing devotional service. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti. Parikshit Maharaj, therefore, was very eager to hear from Shukadeva Goswami about the path of liberation for the conditioned soul. According to the opinion of the ācāryas, the word krama yoga palabdhena indicates that by first performing karma yoga and then jnana yoga and finally coming to the platform of bhakti yoga, one can be liberated. Bhakti yoga, however, is so powerful that it does not depend on karma yoga or jnana yoga. Bhakti yoga itself is so powerful that even an impious man with no assets in karma yoga or an illiterate with no assets in jnana yoga can undoubtedly be elevated to the spiritual world if he simply adheres to bhakti yoga. Mami vaishyasya samshayaha. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 8:7 that by the process of bhakti yoga, one undoubtedly goes back to Godhead, back home to the spiritual world. Yogis, however, instead of going directly to the spiritual world, sometimes want to see other planetary systems, and therefore they ascend to the planetary system where Lord Brahma lives, as indicated here by the word Brahmana. At the time of dissolution, Lord Brahma, along with all the inhabitants of Brahmaloka, goes directly to the spiritual world. This is confirmed in the Vedas as follows. Brahmana sahate sarve samprapte pratisanchare parasyante kritatmana pravishanti parampadam. Because of their exalted position, those who are on Brahmaloka at the time of dissolution go directly back home, back to Godhead, along with Lord Brahma. Text number 2. O great sage Shukadeva Goswami, unless the living entity is freed from the infection of the material modes of nature, he receives different types of bodies in which to enjoy or suffer. And according to the body, he is understood to have various inclinations. By following these inclinations, he traverses the path called pravritti marg, by which one may be elevated to the heavenly planets, as you have already described in the 3rd canto. Purport. As Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita 9:25, Yanti deva vrata devan pitrin yanti pratir vrata bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti madhyajinopi mam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors, and those who worship me will live with me. Because of the influence of the various modes of nature, the living entities have various tendencies or propensities, and therefore they are qualified to achieve various destinations. As long as one is materially attached, he wants to be elevated to the heavenly planets because of his attraction to the material world. The Supreme Personality of Godhead declares, however, those who worship me come to me. If one has no information about the Supreme Lord and his abode, one tries to be elevated only to a higher material position. But when one concludes that in this material world there is nothing but repeated birth and death, he tries to return home, back to Godhead. If one attains that destination, he need never return to this material world. Yad gatva nanivartante tadama paramam mama. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Brahmanda Brahmate Kun Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Bhai Bhukti Lata Bij. According to their karma, all living entities are wandering throughout the entire universe. Some of them are being elevated to the upper planetary systems, and some are going down into the lower planetary systems. Out of many millions of wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets an opportunity to associate with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. By the mercy of both Krishna and the spiritual master, such a person receives the seed of the creeper of devotional service. All living entities are rotating throughout the universe, going sometimes up to the higher planetary systems and sometimes down to the lower planets. This is the material disease, which is known as pravritti marg. When one becomes intelligent, he takes to nivṛtti marg, the path of liberation, and thus instead of rotating within this material world, he returns home, back to Godhead. This is necessary. Text number 3. You have also described at the end of the 5th canto the varieties of hellish life that result from impious activities. And you have described in the 4th canto the first Manvantara, which was presided over by Swayambhuva Manu, the son of Lord Brahma. Text 4 and 5. My dear Lord, you have described the dynasties and characteristics of King Priyavrata and King Uttanapada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead created this material world with various universes, planetary systems, planets and stars, with varied lands, seas, oceans, mountains, rivers, gardens and trees, all with different characteristics. These are divided among this planet Earth, the luminaries in the sky and the lower planetary systems. You have very clearly described these planets and the living entities who live on them. Purport. Here the words Yatedham Astrajad Vibhu clearly indicate that the Supreme, the great Almighty Personality of Godhead, created this entire material world with its different varieties of planets, stars, and so forth. Atheists try to conceal the hand of God, which is present in every creation, but they cannot explain how all these creations could come into existence without a competent intelligence and almighty power behind them. Simply to imagine or speculate is a waste of time. In Bhagavad Gita 10.8, the Lord says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo. I am the origin of everything. Matak sarvam pravartate. Whatever exists in the creation emanates from me. Iti matva bhajante mam hudabhava samanvita. When one fully understands that I create everything by my omnipotence, one becomes firmly situated in devotional service and fully surrenders at my lotus feet. Unfortunately, the unintelligent cannot immediately understand Krishna's supremacy. Nonetheless, if they associate with devotees and read authorized books, they may gradually come to the proper understanding, although this may take many, many births. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:19, Bahunam janmanam mante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti sa mahatma sadurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Vasudeva, Krishna, is the creator of everything, and his energy is displayed in various ways. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 7.4-5, a combination of the material energy, bhumir, apo, and alo vayu, and the spiritual energy, the living entity, exists in every creation. Therefore, the same principle, the combination of the Supreme Spirit and the material elements, is the cause of the cosmic manifestation. Text 6. O greatly fortunate, opulent Shukadeva Goswami, now kindly tell me how human beings may be saved from having to enter hellish conditions in which they suffer terrible pains. Purport. In the 26th chapter of the 5th canto, Shukadeva Goswami has explained that people who commit sinful acts are forced to enter hellish planets and suffer. Now Maharaj Parikshit, being a devotee, is concerned with how this can be stopped. A Vaishnava is paradhukaduki. In other words, he has no personal troubles, but he is very unhappy to see others in trouble. Prahlad Maharaj said, My Lord, I have no personal problems, for I have learned how to glorify your transcendental qualities and thus enter a trance of ecstasy. I do not have a problem, however, I do have a problem, however, for I am simply thinking of these rascals and fools who are busy with maya sukha, temporary happiness, without knowledge of devotional service unto you. This is the problem faced by a Vaishnava. Because a Vaishnava fully takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he personally has no problems. But because he is compassionate toward the fallen, conditioned souls, he is always thinking of plans to save them from their hellish life in this body and the next. Parikshit Maharaj therefore anxiously wanted to know from Shukadeva Goswami how humanity can be saved from gliding down to hell. Shukadeva Goswami had already explained how people enter hellish life, and he could also explain how they could be saved from it. Intelligent men must take advantage of these instructions. Unfortunately, however, the entire world is lacking Krishna consciousness, and therefore people are suffering from the grossest ignorance and do not even believe in a life after this one. To convince them of their next life is very difficult because they have become almost mad in their pursuit of material enjoyment. Nevertheless, our duty, the duty of all sane men, is to save them. Maharaj Parikshit is a representative of one who can save them. Text number 7. Shukadeva Goswami replied, My dear king, if before one's next death, whatever impious acts one has performed in this life with his mind, words, and body are not counteracted through proper atonement according to the description of the Manu Samhita and other Dharma Shastras, one will certainly enter the hellish planets after death and undergo terrible suffering, as I have previously described to you. Purport. Srila Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura mentions that although Maharaj Parikshit was a pure devotee, Shukadeva Goswami did not immediately speak to him about the strength of devotional service. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 14:26, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan kama bhuyaya kalpate. Devotional service is so strong that if one fully surrenders to Krishna and takes fully to his devotional service, the reactions of his sinful life immediately stop. Elsewhere in the Gita, 1866, Lord Krishna urges that one give up all other duties and surrender to him. And he promises, Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mukshayishami masuchaha. I shall free you from all sinful reactions and give you liberation. Therefore, in response to the inquiries of Parikshit Maharaj, Shukadeva Goswami, his guru, could have immediately explained the principle of bhakti, but to test Parikshit Maharaj's intelligence, he first prescribed atonement according to karma kanda, the path of fruit of activities. For karma kanda, there are 80 authorized scriptures, such as Manu Samhita, which are known as Dharma Shastras. In these scriptures, one is advised to counteract his sinful acts by performing other types of fruit of action. This was the path first recommended by Shukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. And actually it is a fact that one who does not take to devotional service must follow the decision of these scriptures by performing pious acts to counteract his impious acts. This is known as atonement. 8. Therefore, before one's next death comes, as long as one's body is strong enough, one should quickly adopt the process of atonement according to Shastra. Otherwise, one's time will be lost, and the reactions of his sins will increase. As an expert physician diagnoses and treats a disease according to its gravity, one should undergo atonement according to the severity of one's sins. Purport. The Dharma Shastras, like the Manu Samhita, prescribe that a man who has committed murder should be hanged and his own life sacrificed in atonement. Previously, this system was followed all over the world, but since people are becoming atheists, they are stopping capital punishment. This is not wise. Herein it is said that a physician who knows how to diagnose a disease prescribes medicine accordingly. If the disease is very serious, the medicine must be strong. The weight of a murderer's sin is very great, and therefore, according to Manasamhita, a murderer must be killed. By killing a murderer, the government shows mercy to him, because if a murderer is not killed in this life, he will be killed and forced to suffer many times in future lives. Since people do not know about the next life and the intricate workings of nature, they manufacture their own laws. But they should properly consult the established injunctions of the Shastras and act accordingly. In India, even today, the Hindu community often takes advice from expert scholars regarding how to counteract sinful activities. In Christianity also, there is a process of confession and atonement. Therefore, atonement is required, and atonement must be undergone according to the gravity of one's sinful acts. 9. Maharaj Parikshit said, one may know that sinful activity is injurious for him because he actually sees that a criminal is punished by the government and rebuked by people in general, and because he hears from scriptures and learned scholars that one is thrown into hellish conditions in the next life for committing sinful acts. Nevertheless, in spite of such knowledge, one is forced to commit sins again and again, even after performing acts of atonement. Therefore, what is the value of such atonement? Purport: in some religious sects, a sinful man goes to a priest to confess his sinful acts and pay a fine, but then he again commits the same sins and returns to confess them again. This is the practice of a professional sinner. Parikshit Maharaj's observations indicate that even 5,000 years ago it was the practice of criminals to atone for their crimes, but then commit the same crimes again, as if forced to do so. Therefore, owing to his practical experience, Parikshit Maharaj saw that the process of repeatedly sinning and atoning is pointless. Regardless of how many times he is punished, one who is attached to sense enjoyment will commit sinful acts again and again until he is trained to refrain from enjoying his senses. The word bishvash, the word bibash, is used herein, indicating that even one who does not want to commit sinful acts will be forced to do so by habit. Parikshit Maharaj therefore considered the process of atonement to have little value for saving one from sinful acts. In the following verse, he further explains his rejection of the process. Kvachin nivartate bhadrat, kvachit charati tat gunaha, prayashchitam ato partam, manye kunjara shauchavat. Sometimes one who is very alert so as not to commit sinful acts is victimized by sinful life again. I therefore consider this process of repeated sinning and atoning to be useless. It is like the bathing of an elephant, for an elephant cleanses itself by taking a full bath, but then throws dust over its head and body as soon as it returns to the land. Purport: when Parikshit Maharaj inquired how a human being could free himself from sinful activities so as not to be forced to go to hellish planetary systems after death, Shukadeva Goswami answered that the process of counteracting sinful life is atonement. In this way, Shukadeva Goswami tested the intelligence of Maharaj Parikshit, who passed the examination by refusing to accept this process as genuine. Now Parikshit Maharaj is expecting another answer from his spiritual master, Shukadeva Goswami. And now we'll take a few reflections or a question. Yes.
Hey Krishna Maharaj, how do you feel about capital punishment?
Well, the way that Prabhupada is explaining it is according to the idea that if you're killed for murder, then you suffer less in the next life. That's the Manasamhita. There is a case in modern times that there's a social injustice in which people who don't have money generally get charged with murder, even if they're not guilty. So Prabhupada's giving an example here of atonement, and if one commits a sinful activity, how it's atoned for, and he's giving that example of the Manasamhita. It's not that this is the main idea that's being projected here. The main idea that's being projected here is that by devotional service one becomes purified. That was simply an example. So there are some anomalies to be considered, but in a perfect world, when one commits murder and the murderer is then executed, then according to Manasamhita, they're absolved of a lot more suffering than they would have if they just were not killed. Yeah. Reflections.
It was interesting to hear how Sukadeva Goswami first tested Maharaj Parikshit. So he first answered this question by referring to Karma Kanda to see Maharaj Parikshit's reaction, and then after that he actually gave the actual explanation, which is Bhakti. So yeah, it's interesting to see how Sukadeva Goswami first tested his disciple before answering.
Yes, the Bhagavatam is endlessly interesting. And there's an interplay between the Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadeva Goswami that does show a personal relationship, and the fact that he was testing him is interesting. Anyone else? Anything strike you? Yes?
I like the point that Prabhupada is bringing out the quality of Paradukha Dukhi and Parikshit Maharaj. Generally, we talk about this quality for devotees like Prahlad Maharaj, Lord Shiva from 8th Canto. But Prahlad Maharaj was also Paradukha Dukhi. And in that purport, Prabhupada is saying that it is the duty of all sane men to save others. So it's not that if we are going out and preaching, we are doing something over and above our capacity, it's our duty. So,
Nice point. It's a very touching point that a person who has a soft Vaishnava heart suffers. And he said that was his only problem, is that he was feeling sorry for those who are implicated in the laws of nature. Thank you. Yes.
The end of the purport to text 9 stood out for me. The word vivasa is used here in indicating that even one who does not want to commit sinful acts will be forced to do so by habit. So unless everything is connected to Krishna, everything else, even though you might not think so, is actually sinful.
Yes. It's impossible to get out of that habit pattern life after life until one rises above the material world by devotional service. Thank you. And yes, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll continue.
Thank you, Srimad. In the purport to text 9, I like the line that Prabhupada writes, a sinful man goes to a priest and to confess his sinful acts and pays the fine, but then he commits the same sins and returns to confess them again. This is the practice of a professional sinner. And I hadn't noticed that before when first reading the Bhagavatam. And I don't know if you have any comment on professional sinners and if that's a concept in Krishna consciousness, or maybe Prabhupada's handled that concept.
Here in context, it's that you're paying money, or it's tit for tat, so you can go on sinning. So that indicates a kind of profession. And it also indicates a system in which you may not find an end to sinning, which is much to the point here. But if you pay for it, then you can go on. It's a sort of profession, because you're paying for it. It's like carbon transfers. Big corporations are asked to pay money for the amount they pollute. They're not asked to stop, but they just limit it because they have a bottom line. That's their interest. It's the money. It's not so much making the environment cleaner. So in that way, it's something, but it's professional. It's the bottom line, money. 1, 2. You were next?
It was actually a very similar point to what the
Yes.
Raja mentioned, and it was, like we generally associate this professional sinning and atonement to the Christian principle of confessing and then being forgiven and then going and repeating the same thing. I was just reflecting actually, even within our own lives, there are many things that, we could categorize as sinful, and it's just becoming more conscious of what those things are. Just reading this again just made me reflect that what are those habits that I'm practicing which are not so conducive that I can weed out and make sure that we move forward.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I think it was on related similar theme about Parikshit Maharaj when he's talking about that he doesn't see the point of somebody committing a sin, then doing atonement and doing it like all over again, what we call professional sinners. It's just a comment what we see in modern society, and it's cutting across all religions, not limited to any religion and all, that some of the biggest donors and some of the biggest donations in religious things are coming from people who have some guilt conscious, and basically they have committed sins, whether they've got it the right way or wrong way, and they are the biggest donors. So that's the kind of dichotomy of our society, because without this kind of donations and all those institutions also, they will not kind of run so easily. So it's like, that basically these guys are sinners and they are like making generous or above generous donations because they have a guilt conscience. But then on the other hand, it also helps to fund a lot of pious activities. So I don't know how this dichotomy, I know that basically for the sinner it doesn't matter because it's like a professional sinner, he's thinking I'm paying to get away. But then is there any good happening for others because of that?
Well, Prabhupada, in another purport, gives a cautionary that those who are accepting donations from others should not misspend, as he says, even a farthing. Because when people give to Krishna, and we use it in Krishna's service, there is some benefit that people get. In fact, Prabhupada told a story about a brahmachari who was going door to door collecting alms for the temple. And there was a householder couple and they were having an argument and they were both in a bad mood. When the brahmachari came to the door, the woman of the house opened the door and the man from the back said, "Who is it?" He said, "Some beggar." And he said, "Give him some ashes and tell him to get out." So she went over in her foul mood, grabbed some ashes from the stove, threw it in his cloth and says, "Jao, get out of here." And so he wrapped it very carefully in his cloth, and when he got back to the temple, he gave it to the pujari. And he said, "Use this very carefully to polish the deity's brass paraphernalia." Because ash is very good at polishing, good for polishing brass. And then so Prabhupada goes on in the story, and he said, so that was going on, that every day the pujari was using a pinch of that ash to polish the brass. And then some months later, the brahmachari was out again, and he was collecting alms, going through the same neighborhood. And now when this household couple saw him from the window, they immediately ran out and they offered their obeisances. And they repented, and they told him how sorry they were. And then Prabhupada ends the story by saying, from one little pinch of ash, then back home, back to Godhead. I included it in that book I wrote called Our Family Business, in a chapter called The Penny Principle, because one may start with an insignificant act, gesture towards devotees, devotional service, and then from that, their devotional service may grow. So we do encourage people to give for their own sake, but we have to be perfect stewards of that and not misuse it for sense gratification. Otherwise, it implicates us. And we've had eras in ISKCON where there was a bent towards just collecting money and not giving anything back for it also, except for, something that wasn't related to Krishna consciousness. And then sometimes when the money came in so easily, I noticed that a lot of devotees started thinking, well, I'm just collecting money, so maybe I'll go into business for myself. And a lot of people who were doing this kind of collecting started just collecting money for themselves and living off of it, or misspending it. And sometimes when money came in so easily without an obvious yajna connected to it, like if you present a book, then you have to explain this is about Hare Krishna. And it's not just easy come, easy go. And that keeps everything in a transcendental mood. And that's something we have to be careful of. Thanks for bringing up the point. We'll take one last one, and you'll have another chance when we break the next time. You had your hand up. I answered it.
No, it was very similar, like the capital punishment and the way the atonement goes. And there is a verse in like Bhagavad Gita where it says that even if you have committed abominable action, but if you come to devotional service, you're perfectly situated. I just wanted you to relate and throw some light, but I think you narrated the story.
Yes. Yeah. That somebody starts in the smallest way. Neha bikramanashosti pratyavayona vidyate solpamapya siddharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. If one does something that's su-alpam, that's as small as you can get, towards a gesture toward Krishna, then that's never lost. That gets counted. And we'll hear that coming up. Prabhupada uses the phrase, everything's recorded and counted. Recorded and counted, everything that we do. Is everyone comfortable? Okay? All right. Shall we go on?
Yes. Yes.
Text number 11. Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Vedavyasa, answered, my dear king, since acts meant to neutralize impious actions are also fruitive, they will not release one from the tendency to act fruitively. Persons who subject themselves to the rules and regulations of atonement are not at all intelligent. Indeed, they're in the mode of darkness. Unless one is freed from the mode of ignorance, trying to counteract one action through another is useless because this will not uproot one's desires. Thus, even though one may superficially seem pious, he will undoubtedly be prone to act impiously. Therefore, real atonement is enlightenment in perfect knowledge, Vedanta, by which one understands the supreme absolute truth. Purport. The Guru, Shukadeva Goswami, has examined Parikshit Maharaj, and it appears that the king has passed one phase of the examination by rejecting the process of atonement because it involves fruitive activities. Now Shukadeva Goswami is suggesting the platform of speculative knowledge. Progressing from karmakanda to jnanakanda, he is proposing prayaschittam vimarshanam. Real atonement is full knowledge. Vimarshana refers to the cultivation of speculative knowledge. In Bhagavad Gita, karmis who are lacking in knowledge are compared to asses. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:15, Namam duskritinam buddha prapadyante naradama mayya pratyagyana asuram bhavamashritaha. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Thus karmis who engage in sinful acts and who do not know the true objective of life are called mudhas, asses. Vimarshana, however, is also explained in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, where Krishna says, Vedaischa sarvera ahameva vedyaha. The purpose of Vedic study is to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one studies Vedanta but merely advances somewhat in speculative knowledge and does not understand the Supreme Lord, one remains the same Buddha. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 7:19, one attains real knowledge when he understands Krishna and surrenders unto him. Bahunam jamanam ante yanavan mam prapadyate. To become learned and free from material contamination, therefore, one should try to understand Krishna, for thus one is immediately liberated from all pious and impious activities and their reactions. Text number 12. My dear king, if a diseased person eats the pure, uncontaminated food prescribed by a physician, he is gradually cured, and the infection of disease can no longer touch him. Similarly, if one follows the regulative principles of knowledge, he gradually progresses toward liberation from material contamination. Purport: one is gradually purified if one cultivates knowledge, even through mental speculation, and strictly follows the regulative principles enjoined in the Shastras and explained in the next verse. Therefore, the platform of jnana, speculative knowledge, is better than the platform of karma, fruit of action. There is every chance of falling from the platform of karma to hellish conditions, but on the platform of jnana, one is saved from hellish life, although one is still not completely free from infection. The difficulty is that on the platform of jnana, one thinks that he has been liberated and has become Nārāyaṇa, or Bhagavan. This is another phase of ignorance. Yene ravindakshravamuktamaninas tvayestavarabhashuddha buddhaya aruya krishrena parampatam tata patantyado anartha yushmadangraya. Because of ignorance, one speculatively thinks himself liberated from material contamination, although actually he is not. Therefore, even if one rises to Brahma-jnana, understanding of Brahman, one nevertheless falls down because of not taking shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Nonetheless, jnanis at least know what is sinful and what is pious, and they very cautiously act according to the injunctions of the Shastras. Text number 13-14. Tapasa brahmacharyena shamena cha damena cha tyagena satya shaucharyam yamena niyamena va dehava buddhijam dhira dharmagya shradayam vita shripantyakam mahatapi vena gulmam ivanaya. To concentrate the mind, one must observe a life of celibacy and not fall down. One must undergo the austerity of voluntarily giving up sense enjoyment. One must then control the mind and senses, give charity, be truthful, clean, and non-violent. Follow the regulative principles and regularly chant the holy name of the Lord. Thus, a sober and faithful person who knows the religious principles is temporarily purified of all sins performed by his body, words, and mind. These sins are like the dried leaves of creepers beneath a bamboo tree, which may be burned by fire, although their roots remain to grow again at the first opportunity. Purport: tapaha is explained in the Smriti Shastra as follows: Manashas chindriyanam cha aikagryam paramam tapaha. Complete control of the mind and senses and their complete concentration on one kind of activity is called tapaha. Our Krishna consciousness movement is teaching people how to concentrate the mind on devotional service. This is first-class tapaha. Brahmacharya, the life of celibacy, has 8 aspects. One should not think of women, speak about sex life, dally with women, look lustfully at women, talk intimately with women, or decide to engage in sexual intercourse. Nor should one endeavor for sex life or engage in sex life. One should not even think of women or look at them, to say nothing of talking with them. This is called first-class brahmacharya. If a brahmachari or sannyasi talks with a woman in a secluded place Naturally, there will be a possibility of sex life without anyone's knowledge. Therefore, a complete brahmachari practices just the opposite. If one is a perfect brahmachari, he can very easily control the mind and senses, give charity, speak truthfully, and so forth. To begin, however, one must control the tongue and the process of eating. In the Bhakti Marg, the path of devotional service, one must strictly follow the regulative principles by first controlling the tongue. Sevam kihi jiva dao, swayameva sparatyada. The tongue, jihva, can be controlled if one chants the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, does not speak of any subjects other than those concerning Krishna, and does not taste anything not offered to Krishna. If one can control the tongue in this way, brahmacharya and other purifying processes will automatically follow. It will be explained in the next verse that the path of devotional service is completely perfect and is therefore superior to the path of fruit of activities and the path of knowledge. Quoting from the Vedas, Srila Viraraghava Acharya explains that austerity involves observing fast as fully as possible. Tapasana Shakena. Srila Rupa Goswami has also advised that atyahara, too much eating, is an impediment to advancement in spiritual life. Also in Bhagavad Gita 6:17, Krishna says, Yuktahara viharasya, yukta chestasya karmasu, yukta swapnavagodasya, yogo bhavati tukaha. He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. In text 14, the word dhira, meaning those who are undisturbed under all circumstances, is very significant. Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, Matrasparshasta kaunteya, shitoshna sukadhukata, agama payino nityas, tam statikshashva bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. In material life, there are many disturbances, adhyatmika, adidaivika, and adibhautika. One who has learned to tolerate these disturbances under all circumstances is called Dhira. Ready for text 15?
Yes.
Okay, 3 people ready. Everyone else cover your ears. Only a rare person, Kechit Kevalaya Bhaktya Vasudeva Parayana Agamtun Vandi Karsnena Iharam Iva Bhaskara. Only a rare person who has adopted complete unalloyed devotional service to Krishna can uproot the weeds of sinful actions with no possibility that they will revive. He can do this simply by discharging devotional service, just as the sun can immediately dissipate fog by its rays. Okay. This is a detailed purport. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. In the previous verse, Shukadeva Goswami gave the example that the dried leaves of creepers beneath a bamboo tree may be completely burnt to ashes by a fire, although the creepers may sprout again because the root is still in the ground. The root of sinful desire is not destroyed in the heart of a person who is cultivating knowledge, but speculators who undergo great labor to gain a meticulous understanding prone to material activities. They may fall down and become implicated in fruitive activities. If one becomes attached to devotional service, however, endeavor, bhakti parishanu bhava viraktiranyatra cha. If one is pious, automatically become distasteful to him. That is the test of Krishna consciousness. Both pious and impious activities are actually due to ignorance, because a living entity, as an eternal servant of Krishna, has no need to act for his personal sense gratification. Therefore, as soon as one is reclaimed to the platform of devotional service, he relinquishes his attachment for pious and impious activities and is interested only in what will satisfy Krishna. This process of bhakti, devotional service to Krishna, Vasudeva Parayana, relieves one. Since Maharaj Parikshit was a great devotee, the answers of Guru Swami, knowing very well the heart of his disciple, explained the transcendental bliss of devotional service. The word kechit, which is used in this verse, means a few people, but not all. Not everyone can become Krishna conscious, as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita 7.3. Manushyanam sahasreshu kasyid yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kasyim mam veti tatvataha. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. Practically no one understands Krishna as he is, for Krishna cannot be understood through pious activities or attainment of the most elevated speculative knowledge. Actually, the highest knowledge consists of understanding Krishna. Unintelligent men who do not understand Krishna are grossly puffed up, thinking that they are liberated or have themselves become Krishna or Nārāyaṇa. This is ignorance. To indicate the purity of bhakti, devotional service, Srila Rupa Goswami says in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Yavilashita shunyam yana karmadyanavratam anakulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktiruttama. One should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. Srila Rupa Goswami further explains that bhakti is kleshagni shubhada, which means if one takes to devotional service, all kinds of unnecessary labor and material distress cease entirely, and one achieves all good fortune. Bhakti is so powerful that it is also said to be moksha lukitakrit, lugritakrit. In other words, it minimizes the importance of liberation. Non-devotees must undergo material hardships because they are prone to commit sinful activities. The desire to commit sinful actions continues in their hearts due to ignorance. These sinful actions are divided into three categories: pataka, mahapataka, unnati-pataka, and also into two divisions, prarabdha and aprarabdha. Prarabdha refers to sinful reactions from which one is suffering at the present, and aprarabdha refers to sources of potential suffering. When the seeds of sinful reactions have not yet fructified, the reactions are called aprarabdha. These seeds of sinful action are unseen, but they are unlimited, and no one can trace when they were first planted. Because of prarabdha, sinful reactions that have already fructified, one is seen to have taken birth in a low family or to be suffering from other miseries. When one takes to devotional service, however, all phases of sinful life, including prarabdha, aprarabdha, and bij, are vanquished. In Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 11:14-19, Lord Krishna tells Uddhava, Yatagni susamadrichi karot yetamsi bhasmasat tatad mad vishaya bhaktir uta vainamshi suttashaha. My dear Uddhava, devotional service in relationship with me is like a blazing fire that can burn to ashes all the fuel of sinful activities supplied to it. How devotional service vanquishes the reactions of sinful life is explained in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 3:30-36 in a verse spoken during Lord Kapiladev's instructions to his mother, Devahuti. Devahuti said, Yanama deha shravanad kirtanad, yat ravanad, yat smaranad api kvachit, shwadho pisadya savanaya kolpate, kutakunaste bhagavan nudarshanad. My dear Lord, even if a person born in a family of dog-eaters hears and repeats the chanting of your glories, offers respects to you and remembers you, he is immediately greater than a brahmana and is therefore eligible to perform sacrifices. Therefore, what is to be said of one who has actually seen you directly, who has seen you directly? In the Padma Purana, there is a statement that persons whose hearts are always attached to devotional service of Lord Vishnu are immediately released from all the reactions of sinful life. These reactions generally exist in 4 phases. Some of them are ready to produce results immediately, some are in the form of seeds, some are unmanifested, and some are current. All such reactions are immediately nullified by devotional service. When devotional service is present in one's heart, desires to perform sinful activities have no place there. Sinful life is due to ignorance, which means forgetfulness of one's constitutional position as an eternal servant of God. But when one is fully Krishna conscious, he realizes that he is God's eternal servant. In this regard, Srila Jiva Goswami comments that bhakti may be divided into 2 divisions. 1, santata, devotional service that continues incessantly with faith and love. And 2, kadachitki, devotional service that does not continue incessantly, but is sometimes awakened. Incessantly flowing devotional service, santata, may be divided into 2 categories. 1, service performed with slight attachment, and 2, spontaneous devotional service. Intermediate devotional service, kadachitki, may be divided into 3 categories. 1, raga bhak samayi, devotional service in which one is almost attached. 2, raga bhasa shunya swarubhuta, devotional service in which there is no spontaneous love, but one likes to the constitutional position of serving. And 3, abhasa rupa, a slight glimpse of devotional service. As for atonement, if one has caught even a slight glimpse of devotional service, all needs to undergo prayaschitta, atonement, are superseded. Therefore, atonement is certainly unnecessary when one has achieved spontaneous love, and above that, attachment with love, which are signs of increasing advancement in kadachitki. Even in the stage of abhasa rupa bhakti, all the reactions of sinful life are uprooted and vanquished. Srila Jiva Goswami expresses the opinion that the word Kṛṣṇa means that even if one has a desire to commit sinful actions, the roots of that desire are vanquished merely by abhasa rupa bhakti. The example of Bhaskara, the sun, is most appropriate. The abhasa feature of bhakti is compared to twilight, and the accumulation of one's sinful activities is compared to fog. Since fog does not spread throughout the sky, the sun need do no more than merely manifest its first rays, and the fog immediately disappears. Similarly, if one has even a slight relationship with devotional service, all the fog of his sinful life is immediately vanquished. Haribol. How much time do we get here? It's 5 hours, right? What? When do we go till? 7:30. Oh, that's great. Well, let's have a few thoughts about what we just read. Yes. Hare Krishna.
I think just in relation to this, I was thinking about Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, Nahi kaśčit kshanampi jātu tishtati akarmakrit. So there's not even a moment where you can't perform activities. And it is very similar in that Parikshit Maharaj is saying that you are impelled to commit sinful reactions. So, and what Sukadeva Goswami is saying is Kechit Kevalaya Bhakti, as in ultimately devotional service is unalloyed devotional service. But there is somewhere in between, right? Like, at least for my own position, you're still working and you have to perform activities and you can't not perform activities. So there's an in-between, and would you then, what Prabhupada is saying is then there is no need for any prayashchitam if you have committed sins at all. Just devotional service is enough. Just chanting is enough. Is that what we can understand?
Oh yeah. Well, Well, there is an interim period in devotional service when we begin, and this unfolds in the story because we'll notice, and other people have asked, and ācāryas have answered, how is it that Ajamila chanted Nārāyaṇa, but it seemed that he went on with a sinful life. He was chanting Nārāyaṇa a lot. He says, Nārāyaṇa, come eat. Nārāyaṇa, please come sleep. Nārāyaṇa, Nārāyaṇa, Nārāyaṇa. And in that case, Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura in the commentary for this chapter explains, as does Prabhupada, obviously, that once he had chanted Nārāyaṇa, then, although he went on the momentum of his sinful life, it was like a snake with no teeth. Although the snake seems to be biting again and again, like that, but there's no effect, there's no poison that comes from it. And the interim period of devotional service, when one begins devotional service in earnest, of course, one has to cross over anartha-nivṛtti. And as Kṛṣṇa Himself explains to Uddhava in the 11th Canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Jata shada makkatasu nirvina sarvakarmasu veda dukkha vakankamams parityage panishvara tato bhaje tamam prita shradalurjananishchaya jushamanams tatam kamams dukho darkams jagarayan. This interim period, he says, is when jata shraddha makkatasu, your faith in the process is awakened, of hearing that it will kill all sinful reactions, and one will progress on devotional service. Nirvina sarvakarmasu, the person also becomes aware that he's disgusted with his tendency to engage in material activities. Veda dukkhatmakam kamams, because he knows that engagement in sense gratification leads to misery. But Bhyanishvare, Veda dukkhatmakam kamams, parityage pyanishvare. Parityage means to give something up. And Ishvare means supreme controller, obviously, but it also means the power to do something. So but he's in this position, he knows what it leads to, but still he doesn't have the power to give it up. So then Krishna says that one should go on with the process and know that anyone who's engaged in devotional service is very dear to him. And gradually, by the strength of the process, one comes to full strength in devotional service. Dukho darkams to garayan. He said, garayan means you should have a little regret, but not too much. If you become obsessed with how unqualified you are, and then you say that I'm permanently unqualified, that's illegal. Because the power of devotional service is so great that anyone can become purified if you just stick to the process. And he said, Garayan, you can take just a little bit of that, like when you use asafatida, hing. If you use any more, if you can use enough that you can see it, that's too much. It has to be microscopic, otherwise you'll kill the preparation. So similarly, we should have a little bit of remorse for the fact that we're not at that level. And in other places, Krishna's, for instance, tavat karma nakuravita nam nirvidyate yavata matkata shravanadova shradayavana jayate. That until the time when one is fully absorbed in tavat karma nakuravita, one should stay in one's occupational position. Don't try to say, okay, now I can just ditch everything because I'm so advanced. But until that time that you have full faith in the chanting and you're fully absorbed in it, then you're obligated to continue all your duties. And so one is fully protected by service because Krishna's there within the heart. As in one more verse that might be added into Priyasya tatyanya bhavasa hari prayeshaha vikarmayachchot patitang katanchit tunoti sarvam hridi sanivishta. This is that if one is on the path of devotional service and makes a transgression and goes into vikarma accidentally, Supadamulam bhajata priyasya tyaktanya bhavasam katanchid Dunoti sarvam hridisani. Because Krishna's there within the heart and understands your intention, he says there is no prayaschita, as Krishna will rectify it. And obviously, yes, 1, 2, 3, 4.
He knew that sinful activities is not good for him, right? No, it should be like this, I think. And he began to do sinful activity, and he called his son Nārāyaṇa. And sometimes I think that maybe he did it like a trick, because when I was thinking about offenses, 10 offenses of holy name, we cannot do sinful activities and think, okay, I will chant Hare Krishna and this will stay. It's offense, right? What is it? This
No, it's one of the main points of this story is that he did not do it as a trick. And that's why it was so purifying. Because he innocently called out Nārayaṇa. If one, however, tries to trick Krishna, nobody can trick like Krishna can trick. So that comes up in the course of the story, that he was an innocent person. If one has engaged in some practice and then strays away from it, but then has the trappings of a Brahmin or a devotee, and that remains in one's life, and one's not intentionally trying to abuse that, then that's one of the benefits of that culture. It clings to you and it keeps you close to Krishna. Okay, who is next? Yes, Prabhu.
Krishna Maharaj. Just a point of reflection.
Keep that close.
Taking the point of atonement. We have age-old practice of going to wash away our sins. We go bathe in the rivers, right? And then in Ganges or Yamuna, go to Kashi, and then have a bath in the river, and then all our sins are washed away. Even recently, the Mahakumbh, right? There, millions of people assembled in the Triveni Sangha and said, okay, all my, I go take a bath there, and all my sins are going to be washed away. But reading through these 16 verses, that principle and that practice is completely rejected here. Hence, okay, atonement is not required, just focus on bhakti and bhakti yoga. So that practice is completely rejected in these verses. So that kind of struck me as we are reading through the verses.
Yeah, Krishna mentions this at Kurukshetra, not during the Bhagavad Gita recitation, but he mentions it to the sages who had gathered there during the eclipse of the sun. And he said that if somebody goes to a holy place just to take a bath, then he's Saeva Gokura. His mentality is like that. I mean, an animal doesn't really understand the principle. And then somebody at class in Mayapur the other day, when we were there for the program, it was who's the famous devotee from? Devakinandan from Singapore. He's the lead counsel for the ISKCON. And he gave a class, and somebody asked him during the questions session, said, so we don't really believe in astrology. Well, we know that it's effective, but it's not that we take shelter of that. So he said, but a lot of devotees do take shelter of it. And he also mentioned the kumbh. Everyone goes to the kumbh trying to get some water at the right time and so forth. So the devotee, it was Shukadev Maharaj, asked, well, what about that? And so Devakinandan's answer was, as usual, it was very balanced and helpful. He said that, of course, it's not in our Siddhanta. As Prabhupada said, when Pradyumna asked him, is astrology in our Siddhanta? He said, no, but if you know it's going to rain, you take an umbrella. And then he said, even devotees know that astrology is not necessary because, as we're just hearing, aprarabdha palam papam kutam bijam palon mukham kramena. Vishnu Bhakti Ratatmanam, that all karma is destroyed by bhakti, so why do you got to keep looking at your chart? And he said, well, devotees know that, but at the same time, the material world is so miserable. And it's really hard not to peek and say, when's this going to be over? It's really hard to, is it going to lighten up at any time? So he had that opinion about that. And, Prabhupada went to Kumbh, but he went there to preach. And while he was there, devotees brought him some water from the Kumbh, and he took a little water and he let them go bathe in water. But that's not why he was there. He didn't go because we got to get there on time and go in the Kumbh. He went there because that was a huge place to distribute books. And he wanted it, that's where everybody goes. And so he wanted ISKCON to be there front and center and show up there. Yeah. There was a couple more. Yes.
Hare Krishna. I read about this contrast quite often, and it's quite prominent here. So Shukadeva Goswami says, only a rare person who has adopted complete and alloyed devotion or service to Krishna can uproot the weeds of sinful actions. You can do this simply by discharging devotional service. And then he gives the analogy of the sun rays which dissipates the fog. But then Prabhupada says in the last sentence of the purport, if one has even a slight relationship with devotional service, all the fog of his sinful life is immediately vanquished. So it seems like a contrast between Shukadeva Goswami saying one has to be a pure devotee in order to do that, whereas Srila Prabhupada saying even if one has somewhat connection to devotional service, then it's immediately vanquished.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So there are different levels of devotional service. And as Prabhupada alluded to the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami says that as soon as you take to bhakti, then you're relieved of material distress for the reasons that we just talked about. It's because the reason we're in distress is because of sinful reactions. And those are destroyed by devotional service. So you feel some pleasure because that distress that's being caused by the pressure of those sinful reactions is lessened. As he says, it's the beginning of all auspiciousness. He says that one who enters into devotional service feels transcendental pleasure. He says that it's rarely achieved. Pure devotional service is rarely achieved. And he says that those who are practicing pure devotional service reject even the conception of liberation. They don't want to be liberated. They just want to serve Krishna. And so in that, we hear pure devotional service is very rare. So then Rupa Goswami describes how there are these different levels of devotional service. Adau shada tata sadhusangata bhajana kriya tato anartha-nivṛtti. Adau shada tata sadhusangata bhajana kriya tato anartha-nivṛtti sat tato nishta ruchis tata. And then after that, after ruchi, these are describing shraddha, and then one's association with devotees, and then takes to the process, and means bhajana kriya. You start practicing devotional service, and then you have to cross the ocean of anartha-nivṛtti. And if you can do that, then you come to nishta, steadiness in devotional service. Then you come to ruchi, then you come to asakti, and then you come to bhava, and then prema. And asakti is the catching point for a lot of people. Although they've taken to devotional service, asakti means you have no other interest. This is only one thing for you. In the other stages leading up to that, you have steadiness, then you have taste, but asakti means all in, 100%, no other consideration. He said that's why it's rare, because not that many people come to that stage that they want the rest of it, and they have developed this greed for it, that they want to have pure devotional service. So So it's just a matter of degree. So there, one who is undoubtedly, one takes to devotional service, the sinful reactions are destroyed, one starts to feel the lessening of distress and so forth. But then the next stage is they become more and more rare. But anyone who comes in contact with devotional service gets purification. And even sometimes people don't know it, but seed is planted and then it develops later.
Thank you.
Did it help?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Are you saying that even if one initially comes to devotional service, those sinful reactions are immediately vanquished, like Srila Prabhupada saying. But then as they're going along their journey, going to this point until Prem, they may still they may still get some reaction from that previous.
Absolutely, and I'll read you a part of a purport that will maybe give you some solace, because it's a really beautiful purport. Can we put it up here?
Yes, Father.
Put up 10:14:8. Tatenu kampam susamikshamano punjana evatmikritam vipakam Bhagva purvir vidadam namaste jiveta yo mukti pade sadaya bhak. So in this verse, Brahma is speaking, praying to Krishna, and he's saying that the devotee always prays for, is always expecting Krishna's ultimate mercy. And whatever happens to him or her, he takes it as Krishna's mercy. He's taking away my karma. And then he said that if one goes on worshipping Krishna despite all the miseries of life with one's body, mind, and words, then he's Sadaya Bhak. He's fit to inherit the kingdom of God. That's the quintessential attitude. And now here's the purport. Srila Sridhar Swami explains in his commentary that just as a legitimate son has to simply remain alive to gain an inheritance from his father, one who simply remains alive in Krishna consciousness, following the regulated principles of Bhakti Yoga, automatically becomes eligible to receive the mercy of the personality of Godhead. In other words, he will be promoted to the kingdom of God. The word susamikshamana indicates that a devotee earnestly awaits the mercy of the Supreme Lord even while suffering the painful effects of previous sinful activities. Lord Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that a devotee who fully surrenders unto him is no longer liable to suffer the reactions of his previous karma. However, because in his mind a devotee may still maintain the remnants of his previous sinful mentality, the Lord removes the last vestiges of the enjoying spirit by giving his devotee punishments that may sometimes resemble sinful reactions. The purpose of the entire creation of God is to rectify the living entity's tendency to enjoy without the Lord, and therefore the particular punishment given for a sinful activity is specifically designed to curtail the mentality that produced the activity. Although a devotee has surrendered to the Lord's devotional service, you just keep it lower, it's okay. Until he is completely perfect in Krishna consciousness, he may maintain a slight inclination to enjoy the false happiness of this world. The Lord therefore creates a particular situation to eradicate this remaining enjoying spirit. This unhappiness suffered by a sincere devotee is not technically a karmic reaction. It is rather the Lord's special mercy for inducing his devotee to completely let go of the material world and return home back to Godhead. So, actually, if you think about the whole material world, the purpose is Krishna wants the living entity to come back to Godhead, but he gives them freedom to try to enjoy separately. And on his own, by misusing his independence, he gets this reaction because he's not powerful enough to control the material nature. Rather, the material nature controls him. And getting out of it requires different phases. And one of the phases, when one surrenders to Krishna, then he helps the devotee through, move along, little fella. Keep going. We're coming close. That's a preliminary discussion, but there's a lot more about it. And it's one of the main topics of the Bhagavatam. When you find that Parikshit Maharaj is talking to Dharma, the bull, and saying, "Your Dharma, what happened to you? You're on one leg now, 3 other legs you've been beaten," and so forth. Dharma won't name the perpetrator. He doesn't say, "It was him, he did it," because he knows that karma is so complex. And he says, if I were to name the perpetrator, then I would be complicit. And equally, I'd have to suffer the reaction for naming the perpetrator, because the devotee understands that everything's happening by the grace of the Lord. Okay. Well, 10, 14, 8. And now we've almost run out of time. There's more questions on the floor. And I just have to say that a good hearing and chanting session means you walk away with more questions than answers. Because there's never a point at which we become satiated and we say, okay, now I understand everything. Krishna's as deep as the ocean or as expansive as the sky. And therefore, when we hear and chant and we develop all these questions, then we're loaded up, because then we want to hear more, and we want to hear the answer to the next thing and the next thing, and the next speaker we hear who we feel like maybe this person can answer my question, then you have a question. If you're taking music lessons and you don't practice, when you go back to the teacher says, "Do you have any questions?" You go, "No." You didn't practice, did you? Because if you practice hard on your instrument, you're going to run into a place where you go, "How do you do this? How do I do that? I don't understand the notation here. What do I have to do?" And the same thing, the hearing and chanting puts us in that constantly ready state to hear more. So that's why I can't answer any more questions. And we have 7 minutes left, but I wanted to leave us with a little bhajan before we go. Does that sound okay? And tomorrow night, if I'm not incorrect, we're taking it up again. And we also have a program during Kartik, through the whole month of Kartik, where we do this process every day for 5 hours a day. And so you're all invited if you'd like to come. Hare Krishna.